The alarm screamed through monitoring station Epsilon 7 like the death cries of a dying star. Commander Vextar's four eyes snapped to the primary display, his chitinous hands freezing mid-motion over the control panel. The readings made no sense. Nothing moved that fast. Nothing generated that much power without tearing itself apart. Confirmation, he barked at his crew, his voice sharp enough to cut through the wailing sirens. Confirmed, Commander, his sensor operator replied, her voice trembling. Single vessel, velocity .97, light speed and accelerating. Energy signature is... She paused, her scaled fingers dancing across her console. Sir, it's reading at 18,000 terawatts. That's impossible. Vextar felt his primary heart skip. The Empire's most advanced dreadnought barely pushed 3,000 terawatts at full combat power. This thing, whatever it was, output 6 times that much and showed no signs of strain. Origin point? He demanded. Uncharted space, Sector 779er. The restricted zone. The restricted zone. Even hardened Imperial commanders whispered about that region of space with something approaching fear. Ancient records, sealed by order of the Imperial High Council 3 centuries ago, marked it as forbidden. No one remembered why anymore. No one except the oldest counselors, and they refused to speak of it. Hail them. All frequencies, Vextar ordered, forcing his voice to remain steady. His communications officer worked frantically. Minutes passed. The vessel continued its relentless approach, now clearly on a direct course for the heart of Imperial space. No response, sir. They're ignoring us completely. Vextar's mandibles clicked together, a nervous habit from his youth. Send a priority alert to Fleet Command. Tell them we have an unknown contact, potentially hostile, heading straight for the core worlds. Classification: Omega-level threat. The moment he spoke those words, he knew the galaxy was about to change. Omega-level threats weren't declared lightly. In the Empire's 2,000-year history, only 4 had ever been issued. 3 of those civilizations no longer existed. 20 light-years away, aboard the Imperial flagship crushing Victory, Fleet Admiral Korath received the alert with a mixture of irritation and dark amusement. His scaled lips pulled back in what passed for a smile among his species. "One ship," he said, reading the report aloud to his bridge crew. "One single vessel has our border monitors crying for help." Laughter rippled through the bridge. The crushing Victory was the pride of the Imperial Navy, a 12-kilometer leviathan bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Around it, 11 more warships of Battlefleet Omega maintained perfect formation, their combined might representing the most powerful military force in known space. Helm, set intercept course, maximum combat speed. Korath commanded, his amusement fading into professional focus. Weapons, charge all primary batteries. If this fool wants to test the Empire's patience, we'll oblige them with a demonstration they won't forget. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "should we wait for additional fleet support? The energy readings are likely sensor ghosts or equipment malfunction." Korath cut him off. "When we arrive, we'll find some upstart colony ship or a malfunctioning freighter. This is a show of force, nothing more. The Empire does not cower from shadows." But as Battlefleet Omega accelerated toward the intercept point, Korath found himself reviewing the sensor data again and again. The numbers didn't change. If they were accurate, if they were real, then what they were about to encounter wasn't just powerful. It was revolutionary. And in the Admiral's long experience, revolutionary discoveries rarely came peacefully. 6 hours later, the fleets met in the void between stars. Korath leaned forward in his command throne, studying the visual feed with growing unease. The vessel that materialized on his screens defied every convention of warship design he'd ever learned. It was smaller than his flagship, barely 3 kilometers long, but its hull gleamed with an almost organic smoothness, unmarred by the external weapon ports and armor plating that defined Imperial military architecture. It looked less like a ship of war and more like a sliver of midnight given solid form. "Hail them," Korath ordered. His communications officer worked the controls. "Channel open, sir. Unknown vessel, you have violated Imperial space. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." For a long moment, silence answered him. Then the speakers crackled to life with a voice that sent ice through Korath's veins. It was calm, almost casual, utterly devoid of fear. "This is the UHSV Defiance, Captain Laura Bennett commanding. You are ordered to stand down and withdraw your fleet immediately. This is your only warning." The bridge fell silent, then someone laughed. Then another. Soon the entire command crew was roaring with mirth at the sheer audacity of the demand. One ship, one tiny ship, ordering the pride of the Imperial Navy to retreat. Korath's own amusement was more measured. He'd lived long enough to know that confidence like that came from one of two sources: insanity or certainty, and the sensor readings suggested the latter. "Captain Bennett," he replied, letting ice creep into his tone. "I am Fleet Admiral Korath of the Galactic Empire. Your vessel is now my prize. Power down your systems and prepare to surrender, or I will reduce you to component atoms." "You have 30 seconds to comply." "Negative," Bennett's voice replied, still maddeningly calm. "Admiral, I'm gonna give you some free advice. Take your fleet and leave. Whatever you think you know about human capabilities, you're wrong. Don't make me prove it." Human. The word hung in the air like a curse. Korath's data officer pulled up the archive files, her movements frantic. When she found the entry, her face went pale beneath her scales. "Admiral," she whispered, "humans are listed as a restricted contact species. Standing orders are to avoid their space at all costs. These orders are sealed by the High Council and date back— "I don't care about 300-year-old superstitions," Korath snapped, though his hearts were beating faster now. "They sent one ship. We have 12. Weapons, lock primary batteries on that vessel. Fire a warning shot across their bow." The crushing Victory's main cannon blazed, a coherent beam of superheated plasma that could punch through a moon. It streaked across the void, designed to pass within meters of the Defiance's hull as a show of overwhelming force. The beam struck something 20 meters from the human ship and simply stopped. No explosion, no dissipation. The energy just ceased to exist, absorbed by shielding that didn't even flicker under the assault. "What in the seven hells?" Korath breathed. "Their shields are holding at 100%, sir," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. "Our shot didn't even register. It's like we threw a pebble at a battle station. All ships, open fire." Full salvos. Battlefleet Omega erupted in synchronized fury. Plasma cannons, railguns, missile batteries, every weapon system the Empire had perfected over 2 millennia of conquest, unleashed in a single devastating barrage. Enough firepower to crack a continent painted the void in deadly light. The Defiant sat motionless in the storm, its shields shimmering faintly as they absorbed energies that should have vaporized it 1,000 times over. When the barrage finally ceased, when the Imperial fleet's weapons cycled down to recharge, the human ship remained pristine and untouched. Then it returned fire. A single lance of blue-white energy, impossibly thin, impossibly precise, reached out from the Defiance and touched the crushing Victory's forward weapons array. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. The beam simply sliced through armor plating like it wasn't there and surgically disabled every primary battery on the flagship's forward arc. Secondary explosions rippled through weapon bays as power cells overloaded in carefully controlled cascades, devastating enough to cripple but calibrated to avoid killing anyone. Alarms shrieked across Korath's bridge. Damage reports flooded in. His flagship, the mightiest vessel in the Imperial Navy, had been neutered in a single shot. "Evasive maneuvers!" he roared. "All ships scatter formation, return fire at will." But the human ship was already moving. It accelerated with impossible grace, dancing between the Imperial vessels like a predator among wounded prey. Every time it fired, another warship lost weapons, engines, or shields. Never life support. Never crew quarters. The Defiance was fighting with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying, proving beyond any doubt that it could annihilate them all whenever it chose. Within minutes, Battlefleet Omega was dead in space, powerless and helpless, while the human ship circled them like a shark considering its prey. "This is Captain Bennett," the voice returned, still infuriatingly calm. "I'll ask one more time, Admiral. Withdraw. Carry this message to your High Council. Humanity has been watching. We know what you are, we know what you've done. And if you threaten us or any of the species you've conquered, you'll discover that your empire's reign is over. Are we clear? Korath stared at his ruined fleet, at the impossible ship that had dismantled them without breaking a sweat, and finally understood the fear in those ancient records, finally understood why his ancestors had sealed those files and marked human space as forbidden. Crystal clear, he whispered into the comm, tasting defeat for the first time in his long career. On the capital world of Draknor Prime, the Imperial High Council convened an emergency session within an hour of receiving Admiral Korath's report. The circular chamber, carved from a single massive crystal 1,000 years ago, hummed with anxious voices as 12 counselors took their places around the glowing central table. High Counselor Thren, eldest of them all, raised one withered hand for silence. At 463 years old, he was the only member present who had been alive when the human files were sealed. He'd been a junior archivist back then, barely worth noticing. But he remembered. Oh, how he remembered. "Show the recording," he commanded, his voice still strong despite his age. The holographic display materialized above the table, showing the brief, brutal engagement between Battlefleet Omega and the human vessel. The counselors watched in stunned silence as their most powerful military force was systematically dismantled. "This cannot be real," Counselor Vren hissed, her crest flaring in agitation. "No civilization possesses such technology. It's a trick, some kind of illusion. It's real," Thren cut her off. "I warned you all. I warned the Council 30 years ago when we voted to expand into the outer sectors. I told you the old restrictions existed for a reason." "You told us ghost stories," another counselor shot back. "Myths about a human empire that would destroy anyone who threatened them." "Well, where was this empire when we conquered the Keltar, or the Vrix, or the dozen other species we've absorbed in the last century?" Thren's ancient eyes glittered with something between fear and vindication. They were watching, waiting. "The old records are clear. Humans don't intervene in every conflict. They're not saviors. They're judges. They wait until a threat becomes truly dangerous, until an empire grows powerful enough to threaten the balance of the galaxy. Then they act." He pulled up another holographic display, this one showing archival footage over 300 years old. A younger Thren, barely an adult, stood in a forgotten section of the Imperial archives, watching an ancient recording. It showed a human scout ship, sleek and advanced even by modern standards, hovering above a primitive Imperial world. The human captain's message played, translated into the Imperial language. "We've been monitoring your development. You show potential for both great good and terrible evil. We're marking your space as restricted. Do not seek us out. Do not threaten the innocent species around you. If you grow into a force of conquest and tyranny, we will return. And when we do, your empire will end. Consider this your only warning." "That was 321 years ago," Thren said quietly. "They gave us a chance. We failed their test." "Failed?" Vren spat. "We built the greatest empire in galactic history. We brought order to chaos, civilization to primitive worlds. We enslaved 17 species." Thren interrupted, his voice like stone. "We stripped their worlds for resources. We forced their young into military service to fuel our expansion. We became exactly what they warned us not to become." Before anyone could respond, every display in the chamber flickered and died. Then they blazed back to life, showing not Imperial seals but a simple image, a blue and green world floating in space, beautiful and serene. Earth. Captain Laura Bennett's face appeared on every screen. She was younger than most of them expected, perhaps 40 standard years, with short dark hair and eyes that had seen too much combat to be easily impressed by posturing. "Members of the Imperial High Council," she began. "My name is Captain Laura Bennett of the United Human Systems vessel Defiance. I'm broadcasting this message simultaneously to your chambers, to every military installation in your empire, and to every conquered world under your control. I want there to be no confusion about what happens next." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Every military installation, every world. The humans had infiltrated Imperial communications so thoroughly that not even the most secure channels were safe. Humanity has been aware of your empire since its founding, Bennett continued. We've watched you grow. We've watched you conquer. We've debated for decades whether to intervene. Some argued you might still choose peace. Others said you'd gone too far already. Today, you forced our hand. The display shifted, showing tactical overlays of Imperial space. Red markers began appearing, dozens of them, hundreds of them, each one indicating a human vessel. We currently have 53 warships positioned throughout your territory. Each one is stationed at a strategic world. Your core systems, your military academies, your industrial centers. Each one is capable of what you witnessed the defiance do to your fleet. But we're not here to destroy you. We're here to offer you a choice. Bennett's expression hardened. Option 1. You immediately cease all military expansion. You release every conquered species and return their sovereignty. You allow neutral observers to monitor your compliance. You transform your empire from a machine of conquest into a true coalition of willing partners. Do this, and humanity will withdraw. We'll continue watching, but we won't interfere further. She leaned forward, and for the first time, anger flickered across her face. Option 2. You refuse. You decide that your pride, your power, your empire is worth fighting for, and we demonstrate in very final terms why our ancestors marked your space as restricted. Why they hoped you'd never give us a reason to return? We will dismantle every warship you possess. We will blockade every world. We will reduce your mighty empire to scattered systems with no ability to threaten anyone ever again. The display shifted again, this time showing archived footage from human conflicts, ships moving with impossible speed and precision, weapons that could glass continents or surgically remove a single building without harming those around it. Shielding that made Imperial defenses look like tissue paper. Technology that was centuries, maybe millennia beyond anything the Empire possessed. You're wondering how we have this capability, Bennett said, as if reading their thoughts. The answer is simple. While you were busy conquering primitive species to fuel your expansion, we were innovating. While you were enslaving others to build your fleets, we were developing AI assistants, quantum computing, fusion technology that doesn't require strip mining entire star systems. While you were stagnant, assuming your superiority, we were evolving. She stood, and behind her the bridge of the Defiance came into view. It was sleek, efficient, with a crew that looked relaxed and professional rather than rigid and fearful. This wasn't a military dictatorship. It was something the Empire had never truly understood, a society built on cooperation rather than domination. We didn't build our strength to conquer, Bennett said softly. We built it to protect. For 300 years, we've been the silent guardians of this region of space. We've stopped extinction-level threats you never even knew existed. We've quarantined dangerous technologies, negotiated peace between species too proud to do it themselves, and watched over the younger civilizations hoping they'd grow into something better than your empire became. Her eyes swept across the counselors as if she could see them through the screen. We're not your enemies. We never wanted to be. We hoped you'd prove our ancestors wrong. That you'd choose wisdom over conquest, but you didn't. And now we're done waiting. The display changed one final time, showing a countdown timer. 7 days. You have 1 week to begin implementing Option 1, Bennett declared. Start by broadcasting a message to every conquered species announcing their immediate freedom. Begin withdrawing your military forces to your core systems. Accept our monitoring teams. Show us you're serious about change. The countdown ticked down a second. If that timer reaches 0 and you've done nothing, we'll assume you've chosen Option 2, and the empire you've spent 2,000 years building will end in a single day. Bennett's image vanished, replaced by the rotating image of Earth and a simple message in every Imperial language. Choose wisely. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Councilors shouted over each other, some demanding war, others calling for immediate surrender. The newspapers, Thren sat silently, watching the timer count down, knowing with absolute certainty what the outcome would be. "We have to fight," Vren was screaming. "We can't just surrender to these upstarts. Call every fleet. Mobilize every world. If we throw everything at them, we'll die," Thren said quietly, but somehow his voice cut through the noise. "We'll die, and we'll deserve it." "You spineless coward," another counselor roared. "We are the Galactic Empire. We don't bow to threats." "No," Thren agreed. "We threaten others. We conquer. We enslave. We tell ourselves it's for the greater good, for civilization, for order. But what have we truly built? An empire held together by fear and military might. An empire where species serve us not by choice, but by force. Is that worth dying for? Is that worth watching our worlds burn?" He stood, his old bones creaking, and called up another display. This one showed casualty projections if the Empire chose war with humanity. The numbers were staggering. Even the most optimistic scenarios showed billions dead, fleet percentages above 90 to 8% losses, and core worlds left defenseless. "They have the moral high ground and the military superiority," Thren said. "They're offering us a chance to survive, to transform, to become something better than we are. I say we take it." "And I say we fight," Vren snarled. "Send a message to every fleet commander. Full mobilization. If the humans want war, show them our full might." Thren finished for her. "Very well. Computer, display current fleet positions and project human vessel locations." The holographic map expanded, showing the full scope of Imperial military power. It was impressive. Thousands of vessels scattered across hundreds of systems, from small patrol craft to massive dreadnoughts. The counselors who advocated for war smiled at the sight. Then the human positions updated in real time. Those 53 vessels shifted, revealing they weren't stationary. They were moving in perfect coordination, each one positioned not just near strategic worlds, but in precise locations to intercept any Imperial fleet movement. And as they watched, the sensors detected something else. More ships, decloaking all across Imperial space. Hundreds of them. Not warships like the Defiance, but smaller support vessels. Transport ships. Vessels that could only be described as humanitarian aid craft. "They're not preparing for war." Thren breathed in sudden understanding. "They're preparing for occupation, for reconstruction. They knew we'd choose option 1 because option 2 was never really an option at all." Admiral Korath's face appeared on another screen, his transmission coming through on emergency channels. His flagship was still crippled, still surrounded by human vessels, but he looked different now, smaller somehow, humbled. "High Council," he said, his voice rough. "I'm watching these human ships up close. I've had time to study them, to understand what we're facing. They're not bluffing. Every sensor reading, every tactical analysis comes back the same. If we fight, we lose. Not eventually, immediately. 2, they've been holding back capabilities we can't even measure yet." He paused, struggling with words he'd never thought he'd say. "I recommend acceptance of their terms. Unconditional. We save lives, we save our species, and maybe we learn from them, instead of burning for our pride." The chamber fell silent. Even Vren had no response to that. When the military itself advocated for surrender, what arguments remained? Thren looked around at his fellow counselors, reading defeat and acceptance in most faces. The timer continued its relentless countdown. 6 days, 23 hours, 41 minutes. "I call for a vote," he said formally. "All in favor of accepting humanity's terms and beginning immediate implementation of option 1. One by one, hands rose. Even Vrin, eventually, her crest lowered in submission rather than defiance. The vote was unanimous. "Then we begin immediately," Thren declared. "Communications, prepare a galaxy-wide broadcast. I'll deliver the message myself. Within the hour, every screen, every communicator, every device capable of receiving transmissions across the Galactic Empire carried the same message. High Counselor Thren, ancient and weary, addressed not just his own people, but every enslaved species, every conquered world, every being living under Imperial rule. To all citizens of the Empire, and to those who have suffered under our dominion," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to say. "Today marks the end of conquest and the beginning of restitution." He explained humanity's ultimatum, holding nothing back. He described the human capabilities, their moral authority, their patience finally exhausted. And then he spoke the words that would reshape the galaxy. Effective immediately, the Galactic Empire renounces all territorial claims made through military conquest. Every species forcibly absorbed into our domain is hereby granted full sovereignty and independence. All military forces will withdraw to our ancestral core systems within 60 standard days. We will accept neutral observers to monitor our compliance and ensure this transition is genuine. Across thousands of worlds, in millions of homes and city centers, enslaved populations listened in disbelief. Freedom, after generations of servitude delivered not through bloody revolution but through the intervention of guardians they'd never known existed. To humanity, Thren continued, his old eyes glistening, we accept your terms, we acknowledge our failures, and we hope, in time, to prove ourselves worthy of the mercy you've shown us today. The broadcast ended. The timer stopped, and across Imperial space the human vessels began coordinating with local populations, preparing for the massive undertaking of rebuilding societies and returning stolen autonomy. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Bennett watched the proceedings with satisfaction tempered by vigilance. Her executive officer, Commander Jake Torres, stood beside her, reviewing the logistical reports flooding in. It's going to take years to stabilize all these systems, he observed. Maybe decades. Then we'll be here for years, Bennett replied. This is what we trained for, what we built our fleet for. Not to destroy, but to protect. To give civilizations the chance to grow into something better. You think the Empire will follow through? Really change? Bennett considered that, watching as human-age ships began landing on formerly enslaved worlds, bringing medical supplies, food, technology to help them rebuild. I think they'll try. Fear is a powerful motivator, but so is shame. Thren seems to understand what they became. Whether the rest of them learn from this, or just wait for us to leave so they can return to their old ways, time will tell. And if they backslide, then we come back, Bennett said simply. And next time, there won't be options. There will only be consequences. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to Earth Command. Mission successful. The Empire has capitulated. Beginning long-term monitoring protocols. As the message raced across the stars toward humanity's home world, Bennett allowed herself a moment of reflection. 300 years ago, humanity had first encountered the nascent Galactic Empire and made a choice. They could have destroyed them then, snuffed out a potential rival before they became powerful. Instead, they'd warned them, given them a chance. Hoped they'd choose wisdom. It had taken longer than anyone expected, but the lesson had finally been learned. The galaxy didn't need conquerors, it needed protectors. And humanity, having learned that lesson the hard way in their own violent history, would continue standing guard. The Defiance turned toward the nearest liberated world, ready to begin the long work of healing and rebuilding. Behind it, the broken remnants of the Imperial fleet began their slow journey home, carrying news that would echo through generations. The age of conquest was over. The age of accountability had begun. And watching over it all, silent and vigilant, humanity would ensure the lessons of this day were never forgotten. In the weeks that followed, the transformation began in earnest. Human Diplomatic Corps worked alongside newly freed species to establish transitional governments. Engineers shared technology not to create dependency, but to give these worlds the tools to stand on their own. Teachers arrived to help rebuild educational systems free from Imperial propaganda. The Empire itself underwent its own painful metamorphosis. Military academies became centers of learning focused on defense rather than conquest. War factories retooled to produce infrastructure rather than weapons. And slowly, grudgingly, the Imperial species began to understand what they'd lost by choosing domination over cooperation. High Counselor Thren lived long enough to see the first freed species send ambassadors to establish diplomatic relations with the reformed empire. Not as subjects, but as equals. He died peacefully at 469 years old, his last words a whispered thanks to the humans who'd given his people a second chance. Captain Bennett would go on to serve another 20 years, overseeing the transition and training a new generation of guardians. The Defiance became a symbol not of war but of hope. Proof that superior force coupled with moral clarity could achieve what centuries of conflict never could. And on Earth, in the archives of the United Human Systems, a new entry was recorded. It detailed the intervention, the bloodless victory, In the long peace that followed, it ended with a simple notation that would guide humanity's foreign policy for centuries to come. Strength without wisdom is tyranny. Wisdom without strength is helpless. Together, they are justice. We are the guardians, and we will not fail in this duty. The galaxy had learned. Humanity would ensure it never forgot.